Well, I'd love to welcome everyone and thank everyone for joining us tonight. Tonight, as you know, is our first Community Ministry Connection educational gathering with the family of 4 parishes. And so we are just truly delighted to welcome our partners and friends at Franciscan Peacemakers. And so tonight we'll be hearing from the Executive Director of Franciscan Peacemakers, Deacon Steve Przedpelski. We'll also be hearing from retired Milwaukee Police Officer Dawn Jones, and then also current board member Wendy Smith. So each of them will share their perspective about sex trafficking in Milwaukee and online, as well as the healing ministry of Franciscan Peacemakers. We will have an opportunity for Q&A towards the end of tonight's conversation. So if a question comes to you, feel free to drop it in the chat. And then I'll leave it to each of the speakers. If you are open to hearing questions as you're talking, please just mention that. Otherwise, we'll make sure that we have a Q&A time at the end. So once again, I want to thank everyone for being here. As you can see, you're all muted. So if you do want to get anyone's attention, please feel free to put something in the chat or use one of the reaction buttons to get our attention. So with that, I'm going to turn the conversation over to Dawn, and she's going to begin our learning experience here tonight. Thank you, Dawn.
Great. Thank you guys for your interest in this and for being here today. When I started investigating trafficking, it was 2007, and I had no idea what I was looking for. Now, I'm born and raised Milwaukee. I went to MPS, Milwaukee Public Schools, and I grew up in the area of 43rd and Lt. So my parents sent me to Pulaski High School. If anybody's familiar with that, it's on the far south side of Milwaukee. And I would have to transfer on 27th and Wells or 27th and Wisconsin to get to school every day and to get home every night. So when I had my first encounter with trafficking, it was because I wanted to go day shift on at the Vice Control Division. It wasn't because I had any knowledge in trafficking. I didn't have the desire to investigate trafficking. I didn't even know what trafficking was. Having said that, when I had my first look into what trafficking was and started reading the materials, I realized I've seen this my entire life. I had seen this when I was transferring on that bus stop. I seen this when I was in school. I seen this around my neighborhood, and it wasn't called trafficking. And then at that time, I think I had about 8 years of law enforcement experience, and 8 years as a detective and 14 years of law enforcement experience. So I thought, man, I really missed the ball on this. Like all these cases I kept thinking about, and I worked the South Side squad. It was Squad 20, which was National Avenue. And I'll be the first to admit, they were prostitutes, and there was a lot of self-blame amongst themselves, but it was even harder when society and the police and healthcare workers all blamed these individuals. And it wasn't until I started investigating trafficking that I realized that these are true victims, and they were considered throwaway people, and there was nobody there to fight for them, and how the traffickers used us and society to strengthen their control on these victims was unbelievable. And it's still out there to this day, including in law enforcement and in the judicial system and in the medical field. And that's a battle that we continue. And I think we have to really have our voices heard and get the education out there that this is anybody's child. This isn't just a Milwaukee problem. This has been identified in every single county in the state of Wisconsin. It's been identified throughout the United States and in many different countries. And people often think that what has to happen is somebody has to be brought from a different country, and that's not the case. The reality is it's anybody's child, and it's anybody that can make somebody else money, whether it be somebody that they know or somebody that they just meet, and it can be family members. When we look at traffickers, we really have to clear the slate and get rid of the box, because it truly can be anybody. And we've had law enforcement officers, family members involved in this, doctors, family members involved in this, people that come from very wealthy households down to individuals that are extremely oppressed. And I think once people start realizing that this could be somebody that they love, that's when they genuinely start to care. And the reality is, I am a Christian before anything, and I that definitely showed through in my work, because I always look for the truth, and I always believe that God would put somebody in front of me um, to for me to help them. And what I realized with trafficking victims is they helped me become a better person than I could have ever helped them. All I had to do was my job and listen to them. And the reality is, the trauma that they experienced in the past contributes to the control of the trafficker. In our in the city of Milwaukee, when I started investigating, I had 3 cases open in the U.S. attorneys in the first 2 weeks that I started investigations. After that, within the first year, I had 30. After the first year, and I investigated for about approximately 9 years, I never was under 100 cases. And people would consistently say, well, you know, they're not really victims unless they're children. And then I'd say, well, that's not the case. Control goes on for a while, and it's very much like domestic violence. And then I added, every single one of my cases had children in them, where they were victims of trafficking. So if I'm looking at 100 cases, that's more than 100 children. You figure King Tut, we had 8 individuals that had ready to testify against him, and we had several more that we could have talked to, and they recruited out of Nathan Hales High School, along with different communities. So when we really want to take a look and think about this, this is not their choice. And we have individuals that have addictions or become addicted because of the trafficker. And I think if we really look at the trauma that these victims have gone through their entire life, we'll realize that there's a lot more to the full picture of what trafficking is and who the victims are. And it doesn't take much for all of us to instill kindness um, and love in the community and respect. And you'll often hear officers that have been prone to encounter trafficked victims, and they will not identify it. And we really need to let people know that this is anybody. This is not somebody that, most of my cases, they were not addicted to drugs. They were not allowed to use drugs. They were not allowed to use alcohol. Uh, Many of them, but there are traffickers that do. We had a case where it was a woman, and she was holding a will work for food sign up because she was new to Milwaukee. And then she disclosed to police that she had that sign up, and somebody took her off the street and injected her with heroin. And sometimes the truth is crazier than fiction. And that actually happened. And we know that because we did a search warrant. We found that sign. We were able to talk to another victim who substantiated and said that happened. Is that the norm? No, that's not the norm. What the normal operation of our traffickers are to find individuals that are seeking love, and they befriend them. Then they convince them that they're Casanova, and they're going to provide them everything in life that they could ever want and imagine. And they start controlling them, just like in a domestic violence situation. And sometimes there's physical abuse, sometimes there's mental abuse, and sometimes there is sexual abuse, and sometimes there's all of it. And being able to identify it and understand it is extremely important. So I'm very fortunate for this opportunity. I'm trying to watch my 15 minutes because I think they said they have this shock collar on me, and if I go over, I'm in trouble. But just know right now that it is absolutely anybody that can be trafficked. And if you truly want to help trafficking victims, you need to show kindness, because they will try to reach out for you, and they'll for help. And very often they're in a state of mind where they're in survival. And so it might not be the best first encounter with you. I've been called more names than you can imagine. And I just continued to treat them with respect. And eventually they realized I was somebody that they could trust and they could come to. And having that is a reality. This isn't Pretty Woman. This isn't something that you're going to see on social media where it's glorified. This is anybody, and they truly are living lives that many of us could not even survive or even know exists. And it's great to see you, Judge. Thank you for signing all my search warrants.
Great to see you too. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Oh, anytime, in any way I can help. I do a lot of free stuff, so I'm cheap labor, but you get what you pay for.
Right, part of your ministry, right?
Absolutely. So I think I'm at my 15 minutes. So I'll be here for questions and answers, and I can't wait to hear the next two speakers. I think Deacon Steve's going to go way over his time, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you so much, Dawn. And I did already put a question for you in the chat that you might want to look at for
Okay.
to the Q&A.
Okay.
So now, Wendy, we'll turn the mic over to you.
Okay. And I did set my timer, so we should be good. I want to thank you for inviting me. I am so glad that the people that are joining us, and hopefully that will be listening to this in the future as a recorded event. My work, so to speak, is a lot different than what Dawn Jones and Deacon Steve's really, besides the educational part that I think we all are, anybody involved in this cause, we all know how important the educational element of this is. But the education for myself personally, I'm on the board of directors for the Peacemakers, but my husband and I also have an organization, a community organization that we started in 2015 called the Washington County Anti-Trafficking Advocates. And basically that started, a lot of it started because of my frustration and anger and really shame for not knowing more about this topic. I found out about it through a girl in town here who was raising awareness. Well, Deacon Steve is really how I found out about it, starting out with products from the Franciscan Peacemakers. And my husband and I own a retail store, so we started selling the products, and that's really how I got introduced to the cause. But also then another event in town by a young girl who was running across Wisconsin, raising awareness about child sex trafficking. Our hearts were moved by her passion. We decided to have an educational opportunity in our community. And I didn't want to look like I didn't know what I was talking about. And it turns out I didn't. And that's why I kind of dove into it and educated myself. And I spent a week of, I like to call it I don't like to call it, but it was a very dark place, because I found out for the first time what was happening. Not just, and I grew up in Milwaukee, that's my city of origin, and now I live out in Hartford, have for 23 years. But I found out that the trafficking issue is not just a city issue, and how it was happening, just the fact that it was happening all around us. I mean, I grew up, I had girlfriends that we did overnights, and most of them lived in the inner city. I lived just outside. I lived on the north side, but I realized situations also that as time went on that I may have missed things and maybe could have been a help, a help to friends along the way. All of that coming, it was overwhelming to me in that week that I really call it my week of awareness. And anyways, my heart was touched. It was a God thing. I believe God really set me on my path, so to speak, and we realized that we needed to educate our community. If I didn't know this, and I talked to other people who didn't know this, I'm like, people need to know this. This is something we need to know. I realized also that it was not something that we could just focus on in one area or one financial status or one part of the state or country. It was all around us. So it became a very big passion of mine. And so that's why we started this organization, which really just educated our community. Our main things are education, advocacy, and connecting people with resources. Because as I found out, through our retail, having a brick and mortar store, we do a lot of talking, a lot of conversation I have over the counter. And I felt that was God's place for me. We did not open up a retail store so that we could work ungodly amount of hours and with not a lot of pay. I knew that there was a purpose. That was something I prayed for, a purpose. And that store and this cause, I believe, just kind of connected. And I have been able to facilitate a lot of conversations that started with me over the counter or a phone call, and that I could connect with the resources such as Deacon Steve or somebody in law enforcement, or whether it be a website or some source of information, or really just listening. The education part is so important for people to understand the topic. And then the advocacy, I advocate for victims of trafficking who really need to understand that there is a community of people who really care and have compassion and don't judge. And I feel like I'm sort of a conduit there. I've been fortunate enough to be trusted enough with friendships from survivors, and I think hopefully connect them with the resources of people that also accept, not just accept them, but embrace them and have compassion and have no judgment and want to help them move forward and heal with whatever resources they have. And advocacy for parents. So Deacon Steve asked if I would focus more on the social media element. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the people that I tend to have more conversations with are parents. Like myself, I have two daughters. One is 22, one is 20. And the people I have conversations with seem to be people with kids, and it seems to lend to the social media element. I deal with the parents and the families, and I advocate for the families who make that phone call after they've discovered something on their kids' social media, or however they found the information, and they are absolutely shocked. And I have been in that position before, and I understand the shock. I understand the outrage. I understand the confusion. I understand what the hell do I do now sort of element. And I feel so much compassion for those people. So that's where my advocacy is. I feel it's important for people to understand, there's advocacy for the victim. There's advocacy for the families. I believe there's a gap. There's a gap that I feel I maybe could fill, and that other people who are listening right now who get educated, because it all starts with the education. Like I said, the education is first, and that will open doors. For me, it led to the advocacy and connecting people as a conduit with resources, but it means different things for different people. The education is where it starts. And for me, through my work, I've built a lot of relationships with different people, and that's where I feel like that's where I'm most helpful, is connecting people with those resources. So I have families who will call me wondering, what do I do with this? I have my daughter, I found this on her social media. I can't believe that this is not, we're a Christian family. This is not possible. And as Dawn said, through all of these conversations, there's statistics, there's data, and there's a million reports. And I am one of these statistic people that I love to collect them and look at them and read them, but I can't retain them. And so what it comes down to is, I know what I see and I know what I hear. And here's what I know and what I hear. I hear that out here in the Washington County area, People are being exploited online. Kids are being exploited online. They're being tricked. They're being groomed. They're being coerced. They're being convinced to send pictures to the person that they trust online. And then when that picture is sent, and maybe it's just bra and underwear, maybe it doesn't seem like a big deal to the kid, then that trafficker or that predator demands more. And if they don't send it, they're going to share all of that information with their friends, with their families. They use shame then to control them and to gain more and more and more. And so I see this. I've had so many conversations, and these are families that I know, some of them I don't know. Some of the kids I know, some of them I don't know. What I'm here to say is that it is happening in small rural towns. It is happening to kids while they're sitting in the safety of their bedrooms at home, or maybe at the kitchen table, or maybe in the family room where everybody else is sitting playing a game and they're online. It's happening. What I see, I mean, there's all different levels of exploitation, or different ways that it happens, or different places that it happens. But what I'm seeing, and what the message I want people to hear is that that just because your child is home safe, this whole pandemic, kids are home, parents are home, we think that they're safer, when in reality, predators have more opportunity to be at home with their computers that they're working, while they've got the other computer that they are able to be online more and hunt down these. I'm looking at my timer to make sure that I don't get too far. They're able to have their work screen going, and they're exploiting, their other work, so to speak. And kids are online so much more, and their parents are trusting that they're doing their work, and they know that they have to be on there for schoolwork. There's so much more. There's an FBI agent. This is coming from one of the reports, and I could cite the source. I have it. I just don't have it on my tip of my tongue. Who says that any kid with an iPhone or with a cell phone has been seen virtually by a predator. There's a number that says 42% of victims of sex trafficking online have 42% of victims of sex trafficking that have been groomed and trafficked online have never even met their trafficker. So that's to say that there is a large percentage of sexual exploitation, trafficking that is happening without the child even leaving the bedroom. And that's shocking. That, to me, that was so shocking that could be a statistic that could be happening right underneath our noses. And it just reinforces the fact that, like, what I see as well is people who have this preset judgment of what a trafficking victim looks like. They're on a street corner. They look like this, they act like this, they have this race or gender, but we forget about the boys, we forget about the gaming sites, we forget about the young people on the younger. These predators go where the kids go. I know that one question that parents like to ask is what apps do we need to be afraid of? Or what platforms do we need to be afraid of? And there are lists of things, but I say what you need to know is that wherever there is chat capability is a place to fear. So it's not so important of what the app or what the chat platform or what the social media platform is. The predators will use just about anything, and they will move the victim from platform to platform to keep it kind of hidden, so to speak. And I've heard this, I've seen this. It's not something that only happens someplace else. This is happening in anyone who's listening right now, this neighborhood. I can tell you that every conversation I had, so I wore this shirt today, "Girls are not for sale." When I'm gonna do a presentation, I typically take the opportunity, I wear it to work, because then people always ask, "What's that shirt mean?" And that gives me an opportunity to talk about this, because my husband tells me I can't overdo it and attack my customers with trafficking information every time they walk in the door. most people have to fear the salesperson. In our store, they have to fear getting too much information about sexual exploitation and trafficking. But it is a great opportunity. And I can tell you that every single time the conversation starts, I know the look. And there's and then the conversation as it goes on, it opens up, and there's somebody that trafficking or sexual exploitation or online exploitation has touched in their family, that they have been touched by it. I just had a conversation up until I was kind of running late because the person stayed late to chat, and today. And that conversation was about an hour conversation. And it started out just like anything else. They were looking for a gift and asked where this shirt was from or why I was wearing it. And the point of that information is that no matter who I talk to about this topic, I've heard people say, well, why have we not seen more about this online, or in the news, or why don't we hear more stories? The answer always to that is start talking about it and you will hear the stories, because I do. That's why I hear so many stories, because I talk about it. People understand that I'm a safe place, I'm a safe person and not judgmental, and that I understand. So just to kind of wrap up what I like to say to people, again, I like to offer resources to anybody. I think it's really important. And I think anybody who is watching this right now and says, how can I help? How can I be a part of the solution? How can I make a difference? The thing that I have to say to you is educate yourself, okay? If you're a Christian, pray about what your path should be in that matter. Look around at your resources. What do you do? Who are the people who are the people you talk to on your daily basis, and talk to them about what you're learning. If you do that, you're going to hear more stories. You're going to have more opportunity to be an advocate, so to speak, because now you're advocating for the fact that you're getting educated. Now you're advocating for somebody to understand that these are victims, and you're and educating them as to how they get to that place. As Don Jones says, people have, by the time they're out on the street, they've endured so much so much trauma. Where did that trauma start? Think about what I'm saying. I'm here on the other end of the spectrum. These Deacon Steve and Don Jones they're like downstream. They're pulling these people out of the stream. I'm upstream here dealing with people more people who are online, who are maybe just in the grooming phase, maybe the parents of the kids who, if they are diligent and educated, they can spot the signs. I dealt with a family just a couple weeks ago. The woman was already educated about the topic. She's been following us on Facebook. She's been to my meetings. She's watched Deacon Steve on presentations. She had a couple of things happened in her household with her daughter, and she called me, and she was horrified, and they're shocked. But she interjected because she was educated. I have no idea. I connected her to Deacon Steve. From here on, there's only so much I can do. I'm kind of out of it and waiting for the next call. But the point is that we don't know how that could have impacted the trajectory of that situation just because that parent was educated. We have the power to make a difference if we have children, grandchildren, and you notice certain things. And there's a plethora of that kind of information that I would love to share, but there's just not enough time. But that's why you have to educate yourself. I do want to leave you with one resource. There's a million of them out there, but I'm really proud of the Wisconsin Department of Justice, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. They've got a website that is just, they're kicking butt. They're really doing a lot of work, producing podcasts, programs called Interact. It's called Protecting Kids Online, Protect Kids Online, and it's podcasts and interactive programs that you can have with your kids to educate, role playing and things like that. And there's a plethora of other information on there. And I highly recommend just start there. Start with the Wisconsin Department of Justice Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. Go to the website and you'll find a plethora of information and educate yourself. You can't believe how much difference it can make. If you're educated on the topic, you can interject yourself and perhaps stop and some of these victims from getting all the way downstream and to the point where it's really hard to pull them out of that stream. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, Wendy, thank you so much. And thanks for sharing that specific resource with us. And then similarly, I already put a question for you in the chat that you might want to preview. But if other people have questions percolating, please feel free to put them in the chat. But for now, we'll turn the microphone over to Deacon Steve.
Thank you, Lauren. Good evening, everybody. Franciscan Peacemakers began at the invitation of a police captain out of District 4 who was way ahead of his time, and I had to go back into the archives to get his name. But he reached out to the Parishes and said, there's got to be a better way than arresting, releasing, arresting, releasing. And so Franciscan Peacemakers came into being with 2 Capuchin priests, men, obviously. And then a few months after that, 2 other male volunteers. I was one of the 2. And when I think back to 26 years ago, what did 4 men know about helping women off the streets? We used to encounter the women in neighborhoods. The Vice Squad at the time took us to all the neighborhoods in Milwaukee where street prostitution was prevalent. And one of the priests, he had the idea that the women chose this. And so we just had to help them make better choices. And so we started out getting to know the women on the street, and we'd say, get to know them and say, we can help you. And they'd say, what can you do for us? And we would talk about, we could help them get into transitional housing. We could help them reconnect with their families. We could, help them with a lot of material things, important things. And in the first few months, 2 women took our offers, and we thought, oh, we got this licked. And both of these women to this day, they're clean, successful. They're like the dream women that you want to meet, say they're going to take advantage and want to be productive people. It took 3.5 more years before the next woman took a chance. But we moved from saying, we can help you, to asking, can we help you? And it was still the same thing of, how can you help? And they began to tell us their stories in the streets, which led us to organizing a group where the women could come on Saturdays, sometimes Tuesday nights, where they could just spend time together, talking about their struggles, talking about what brought them to the streets. I listened to probably what I understood to pay attention to. I listened to them tell the stories of sexual abuse as children, but I didn't pay attention to them saying about how the father, the stepfather, the grandfather, the mother's boyfriend, a male acquaintance would pay them in candy, in movie tickets, jewelry, to do sex acts with them. Wasn't connecting, and nobody knew the word trafficking way back then, but still wasn't connecting that this was a guy pimping this child out. But the more I listened, and I would start to ask the women, what could we as an organization do to help you as an individual trying to leave the streets, or do you want to leave the streets? And so over a couple-year period, the women began to say to me, don't presume you know what to do. We want people to listen to our stories. And so I began to ask, always with a please, if you're ready, tell me what happened to you. And not presuming to be, the white guy and the shiny white horse. And most of the women we were dealing with at that time were African-American women. But they began to tell me the stories. And they began to tell me the same thing that I heard years earlier. But I began to pay attention to these various men who sexually abused them, were paying them, they were selling them through the neighborhood to perform sex acts in garages, in basements, in taverns, in liquor stores. And so many of them, that's where they started their alcoholic tendencies. A lot of these women, in their efforts to feel like they were in control, as juveniles, still began to strip. And the police officers in the vice squad we were working with at the time, they started to let the strip clubs know that we were going to be coming in there to talk to the women, and that we had these detectives' numbers, and the owners and the managers better let us talk to them. And we worked with a couple other organizations at the time, and we made some progress, but it just wasn't a right fit. So we spent most of our time in the early years on the corner of 16th and North Avenue. It was a place where a detective said there's a lot of gun running. He pointed out just from this corner, you could see 6 different drug houses. A lot of violent crime happens. And he said, if you want to make an impact, this is where you're going to do it. And so we spent, I don't know how many years, 5 nights a week, 16th and North Avenue, 6:30. Catholic parishes came, they brought lunches. And again, we began to meet these women one by one and asking them, can I hear your story? And over time, they started coming to the group. At times we had as many as 20 women coming to a Saturday group or a Wednesday afternoon group, talking about the desire to heal. Trauma was not a word that was used back in 2005, 2006. It was just starting to come into some practitioners' vision. And as I was talking to a social worker who was also a therapist, she said, it's important to try to connect the women with psychotherapy. And I said, isn't that for crazy people? Because what did I know? My background prior to ministry was in manufacturing management. And so again, everything along the way was learning by listening, learning to the therapist, learning from the women, learning from other women who cared about these women, but couldn't help them find a way. So for years, being out on the streets and feeling like we're not accomplishing anything because all we could offer the women on a daily basis were bag lunches, personal care items. We could connect them to transitional living if funds were available. But transitional living, even in this day, gives the woman the opportunity for maybe 60 days. If there's money in a state budget, maybe 90 days to go and try to get their lives together in 90 days in what it took 27 years to destroy. And I was at a point back in 2011 of like really thinking about it's just time to stop. And my colleague Harmon at the time, she just said, God wants us out here. And maybe one day God will tell us what we're supposed to do. And I learned about a program down in Nashville, Tennessee called Thistle Farms. And as I listened to the woman who started it, an Episcopal priest by the name of Becca Stevens, talk about all the things she went through trying to help the women, trying to understand what they needed. I learned it just wasn't a man who would ask the wrong questions at the beginning. It was just not having the knowledge. And also learning how to ask the women to tell their stories. But what she learned from therapists was we got to find places where the women can stay 1 year, maybe even 2 years. Because psychotherapy, to really have a chance to work, needs at least a 2-year period where the person, male or female, and whatever the trauma they're dealing with, to really focus on the healing. because they're going to want to run away. They're going to want to run and relapse because they didn't feel any pain. I didn't think it was anything we could pull off and do. And Carmen and I, we went down to Tennessee, we learned about it. And as I listened to Becca talk, in like 15 minutes, I'm going, we could do this. And I began to contact volunteers of ours and just explain this with, and I've heard different descriptions on how excited I was to create this program for housing, to give the women employment so they could feel like they're earning their own money, they're making their own decisions. And part of the thing was they didn't have to worry about housing, they didn't have to worry about employment, while they were focusing on recovery and healing. And so back in 2012, 2013, I'm sorry, Carmen and I, after we came back and after we talked with a lot of people, we kicked off what was known, our social enterprise at the time was known as Gifts for the Journey. And about a year later, we opened up Clare Community. And right now we can care for 3 women. They can stay for 2 years. They have to agree to enter recovery. They have to agree to take a chance on themselves to enter a trauma-informed care program and work. And in the first year or two, it was just like, what the hell have we unleashed? Because the women were coming in and out, in and out, in and out, and it just wasn't working. But then it began to work. And I can't say why, I have no idea, but it began to work. And the women were staying longer, and the women were investing in themselves. The first woman who came to Clare Community was this young woman, Emmy, that Wendy had met from Hartford. And it was the FBI that first brought Emmy to us after she was rescued down in Tennessee. And Wendy stayed for a day and decided she wanted to do in another program up in Fond du Lac County. And her life went in a lot of different directions, but her and I, we never lost contact. And from time to time, she'll say that contact with you, even when I went out and relapsed, even when I went out and did whatever, was very important to me. And so maintaining relationships. I don't know if we got better at doing relationship work with the women living in Clare Community or whatever. So right now it's working more. But as the women come to, we have a building now on 34th and Lisbon. That's where our social enterprise is housed, and that's also where the hospitality center is. And we invite the women to take a chance on themselves. And we continue to ask the question, what happened to you? And they see a woman, Cynthia, who I ministered to on the streets for almost 12 years. I often wondered how Cynthia stayed alive. Cynthia graduated our program last May. She runs our hospitality centers. She does street outreach. She'll do anything she can to try to convince the woman to take a chance on herself. And I stand back and I'm in awe of her because she went through it. And she said, you know, I understand your frustrations and I also understand their frustrations. She said, now I just got to figure out how to make that bridge shorter. When we focus on the healing of the individual and not on what society would say, she's worthless because she chose this path. Way too many people still believe women choose this path. And I see my time is running out. And I just want to close, talk a little bit about Wendy and what she does in Washington County. These people do come to her. And I was going through some of my notes over the last 4 years, and Wendy has referred 21 families to peacemakers to help them with their daughter. Out of those 21 contacts, 9 of those turned into investigations. And there's 4 that are active right now. And these investigations are not only in southeastern Wisconsin, but are taking law enforcement to the oil fields in the Dakotas, down to Missouri, to Ohio, up into Canada. All because Wendy took a chance on wanting to learn about what sex trafficking is, how it affects individuals, and people trust her. And I could go on for hours and talk about Dawn and what a privilege it was working with her, both when she was in police department and working with her now, that we serve victims together. And these are 2 women who are on my list of my top 10 heroes. And I want to thank you both for everything that you have helped peacemakers do, but more importantly, the service to these women that you do so very well. Thanks.
You set the bar high for us, so we're still striving to get to you.
Oh.
Right? That is the truth.
I do have to say, Laura, there's another board member I noticed online here by the name of Jim West. And he is somebody who has been, and various family members for that matter, along for the ride for almost a full 26 years. And Jim, I thank you and Joanne as well, because Joanne puts up a lot with Jim. Just saying.
Well, Deacon Steve, that was really beautiful to hear the long view. And I think maybe all 3 of you used the word encounter. And then Deacon Steve, you also talked so much about learning through listening. And I feel like each of you has given us the opportunity to do that tonight, to learn through listening to your story. So I thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and things that you've learned over time to help all of us learn and grow. So I would love to invite people to ask any questions that they may have. I know my head is just jumping with things that I want to learn more about. And I thank you, Shelley, for putting that website in the chat. So if people want to go and grab that, know that that's there. And that way you can access that on your device. But feel free to unmute yourself if you do have a question that you would like to ask anyone.
I see that somebody asked the question about what are some of the flags parents or other concerned adults should look for on social media. I just wanted to address that. You know, there's the one thing that the one thing that I have heard from survivors, that I have heard, that I have experienced, and that I've heard from other parents is a change in attitude, a change in friends, a change in language, conversation. I will say, from my perspective, noticed a considerable change in one of my daughters and chalked it up, unfortunately, to teenage angst, as I know most parents do, because it's a tough one online when you're dealing with kids and their social media, and when you're dealing with the kids in anything, in any way. But the social media, as they become so engrossed in that world, and it's really hard to get them to I don't know how I'm trying to say this, but it's so they change a little bit in my opinion, by that, because they become engrossed in that world. But I think noticing a change in language and a change in if their conversation is more sexual, I had a survivor friend that said she wishes she was trafficked as a child, and she wished somebody, particularly her parents, would have noticed the change in her, the language. Now, this was not an online thing, but it's really similar. Changed in her language, changed in her dress, the way she dressed, changed in her attitude, in her behavior. Subtle things like that. Things that you're like, what the heck? And nowadays, unfortunately, I think it's more confusing because now we've got the social media. And so we've always, kids have always been, they go through that particular teenage years and then everything starts changing and they get more defiant and all that. But now we've got a really important element here on social media. And I say that one of the questions that I would suggest parents say, if they're not sure, is this teenage angst? If you're not already, first of all, asking them about their social media usage, then you are behind the 8 ball, but you're not unusual. You're not unlike most parents. So I'm not trying to shame anybody because I will raise my hand. I was not watching as much stuff as I should have because you trust your kids and they haven't given you any reason yet not to trust them. So therefore you trust them. However, the world of social media is a whole other world going on. And if you ask them, if you aren't checking it and you say to them, how about if I look at your social media, could you give me some of your passwords? And you see absolute horror in their eyes, in their reaction, I would say that you probably already have a problem. And you need to find a way to gain trust and to talk, and you need to find out what's going on. And that's not a black and white thing. So to say, oh, all you gotta do is just get in there. But the best advice I can have is starting early and having, family plan really, educate your kids about what social media, what predators are looking to do, how they talk, they ask questions, sexually explicit questions. They like to ask you about role playing. They like to ask for pictures. They like to ask what you've done, what you like to do, all of those kind of questions. Educating your kids about stuff that they are seeing. The average age for a kid to see pornography online is like 9. So for us as parents to be so naive to think they're not seeing and hearing this stuff is really ridiculous. If you give them a phone with that's access to social media or the internet, if they have the device, they're just a couple clicks away. I just want to say one more thing real quick. I don't want to take a lot of time, but I'm going to try to, I don't know if it's possible. I see Deacon Steve laughing. I have some information sheets that answer that question, some red flags and things. So if I can somehow get that attached, I will do that. So, but
Sure.
to finish my thought, what was my, see, there I go. There too many thoughts in there at once. For the parents so for the parents to have the conversations with the kids ahead of time, to have the game plan. It's like if you have a safety plan for if there's a fire in your house, you have a safety plan for your social media. If you see this, because now they're educated, if you see this picture and it makes you uncomfortable or somebody asks you this question, their biggest fear is that they're going to be in trouble, whether they're a young kid or an older kid. So for them to know they're not going to be in trouble because it's not your fault that somebody sent this to you or asked you this question or did whatever. So you're going to come to me and you're going to ask me about it and we're going to figure it out together. And so doing it more as a preventative matter of fact, so that they know they're seeing it, they're seeing it. And so might as well address it and get aggressive with the preventative side of things.
That's really helpful, Wendy. Thank you. And I did make you a co-host, so you might be able to screen share or drop something in the chat, whatever might work for you. And then I see, Ray, that it looks like you have a question that you might want to ask.
Yeah, it sounds like you want to clone Wendy. If you could have a lot of Wendy's around.
And we can, because everybody out there can be.
What kind of retail business do you have, Wendy?
We have an inspirational gift shop in downtown Hartford.
Okay. I was in the hair business, in the hair salon for my career, and this would be a great you know, because people come into the hair salons and they have a lot of confidence in you. And that would be a great place to
Yep.
find information out too, by educating the employees.
It's a great point. And that's why one of our logo is the many piece, or the tagline that we use at the Washington County Anti-Trafficking Advocates is everyone is a part of the puzzle. Everyone's piece has to fit in, and everyone has a way that they can make a difference. And that's why I say everybody can be an advocate. You can clone me by just you and everybody watching, and then everybody else that they teach, just getting educated and then talking about it. That's all it takes, is talking about it. And then you educate yourself more, and you, I've, you know, can't tell you how many articles and things, and it's just a part of my life. I'm dedicated to it. Every day I read something about something, or I talk to somebody. And it really, what you said is so true. It's so important to have those conversations wherever you are, wherever your walk of life is. I can't do what you can do, and I can't do the amazing, awesome stuff that Deacon Steve and Dawn Jones can do, but I can do what I'm doing. So I'm not going to try to be a professional law enforcement detective, because I would just get myself shot most likely. But I can be, you know, me, and you can be you, and we can all do our thing where we are, and it makes a huge difference. And we can help the Deacon Steves and the Dawn Joneses and all the other people working on that really ugly side of things. We can help them on their job, because they're working in the trenches, is what I like to say. Like, they're the people, they're my heroes. They're working in the trenches, really doing the really, really dirty work, seeing things that most of us don't want to see. And if we can be on this end of it and just try to pluck some, or avoid people getting into that river that they're going to be picking those victims up downstream, if we can keep them out of that with our education and our advocacy and our connecting people with resources early on, we can really make a difference together.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Dawn, I was the person who put a question in the chat for that as well. So I would invite you to respond to that if you wanted, but I also don't want to hog all the question space. So if anyone else has a question that they would like to ask, feel free. But the question I put in the chat was, you mentioned that it's almost like you had an unveiling, like where all of a sudden you were seeing things that you had been seeing for years, but you didn't connect, that you didn't know that it was trafficking. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, this is what trafficking is. Would you be able to share with us what some of those things are?
Well, definitely how I viewed control on the victims. Very often, so I worked sensitive crimes as a police officer, and then I worked narcotics as a detective. And in both of those, we would come across individuals doing sex work, and it was an implicit bias. It was in our training that, okay, this is a willing participant. And the reality is, when you put anybody in a position where their life or someone they love's life is threatened, or they're manipulated and controlled, and there's something that can be held over them, they will do things that they never thought they would have. They will cross lines that they never thought they would have. And a lot of times this isn't something that happens overnight. King Tut, he had all these young girls, and he would take 1 to 3 months to groom them into sex trafficking. He would hold group sessions on the poise that they were all a family and they were all a team, and that they were going to work through their trauma together. And the reality is, he'd never had to lay hands on one of them, because he knew what their greatest fears were, and he was able to control them that way, especially when there's threats of control, and not knowing how to get the help, because the traffickers will tell them, nobody's going to believe you. They're just going to think that you're a prostitute or a whore, and nobody's going to believe you at all. And when you look at a lot of the media that's out there, the song lyrics that are out there, it substantiates it, and having that trauma trigger of being called a prostitute or a whore will immediately prevent anybody from coming forward, because they're trying to give their account of what happened, but the risk of somebody not believing them can cost them their life or somebody they love their life, and people are not willing to take that risk. You will have many individuals that won't disclose. We just, I'm the chair of the Milwaukee Joint Human Trafficking Task Force, and we just presented Sarah Demarest with a Woman of Valor Award. And two things that she said that I cried like a little baby. I'm not gonna lie. I edited it out of the recording, but I cried. Is one that she said that she never thought God could love somebody like her. And the other thing was that she disclosed everything, all of her time when she had been incarcerated, when she had gotten into trouble. She disclosed everything except for trafficking. And it wasn't until her last time in prison that she was able to talk about her event of trafficking. And she said she couldn't believe how many women were incarcerated that had lived the same life and had the same story as hers. And I think, what are we doing in our community that, first of all these children are being brought into trafficking, but we have this vicious cycle where all these individuals are incarcerated, all on the fact that the traffickers have that control. And that's a very, very sad thing, because if we can't take care of our own community, who can we take care of? Especially our children, who have nobody to fight in their corner for them. So it didn't take much for me to see. I dealt a lot with trauma victims, but when I saw it, I thought, man, I missed so much. Never again. All I like Deacon says, you have to listen, but you have to hear, and you have to be show respect and kindness. You know, the smallest things, you could see somebody out there, and all you have to do is smile at them, and that will give them hope that they are worth something, because they're told every day they're worth nothing.
Thank you. It's really important for us to hear, I think.
I have a question.
Laura, I know you've been to our place on Lisbon, and if you ever want to organize right now small tours to come and visit, you know,
Okay.
please let me know, or you can let Shelley know, and be more than happy to show people not only what we're doing, but show them a little bit what's going on in the neighborhood over on Lisbon, and how that happens in many parts of the city.
Great. And I'm going to take that, Deacon Steve, to as an opportunity to share my screen with just some quick ideas for ways that people might want to stay connected with the Ministry of Franciscan Peacemakers. And again, these are just a few ideas. And it looks like, Wendy, I think that may have been you, just put another resource in the chat. So learning, you know, just continuing this journey of learning. So Franciscan Peacemakers has a wealth of resources on their website. When you go and you look across the tabs at the top, they have a podcast and a blog tab. So that has a lot of information there. You can also subscribe to their newsletter. Of course, you can support the Ministry of Franciscan Peacemakers through their social enterprise, and at the same time enjoy absolutely wonderful bath products or candles, and also some jewelry and other items are also available for sale. I noticed Deacon Steve is using what has now become my favorite mug. You can go to their physical storefront, which is on the corner of 34th and Lisbon. You can also shop right now online. We do have a promotional code, family of 4, if you would like to have free shipping. If you don't purchase, there's always free shipping on orders over $65. But if you don't hit that threshold, if you also want to make a donation to their Community Cares initiative, that's an initiative where soap products will be sent to other area organizations. And this month, the partner is River West Food Pantry, that the family of 4 also has a lovely relationship with. So you might want to consider that. If you haven't started following Franciscan Peacemakers on social media yet, I highly recommend doing that. They have a very active presence. And so that's very helpful. And then the Peace and All Good podcast. Not only can you find that on the website, but there's also a YouTube channel. And of course, financial donations are always welcome. So those are just some suggestions that I had. I don't know if anyone else has other suggestions of ways of staying connected. I'll keep that screen up for just a moment more, and then I'll take it down so we can say our goodbyes. Any other questions or suggestions?
I just want to mention that, thank you, Shelley, for dropping those links in, but Shelley dropped in there the link for this NetSmarts handout. What that is, well, it's actually going to get you to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website, and they have a program, NetSmarts, that they have a ton of resources for parents and kids. And it's got red flags for noticing things regarding social media, how to be proactive, how to report if you think your child is being exploited. So it's got a plethora of resources there.
Super, thank you. Well, if no one has any last questions, of course, in our easily connectable world today, it will be easy to reach out to Franciscan Peacemakers, and I'm sure Deacon Steve would be happy to help connect you to either Dawn or Wendy if you had specific questions for follow-up.
Can I just say one last thing? I'm sorry. I don't want to have the last word. I'm not trying to steal the last word. I do want to, as you just said, I really should give you my cell phone number. Deacon Steve does have that though. But really, there's a gap that I just want to just real quick identify. It's a tough one. So if there's a parent that is listening right now, or somebody who has a situation and they're not sure what to do with it, and maybe it's not illegal, so they're not going, maybe it's not a crime yet at this point, it's just suspicions. Of course, Deacon Steve or Dawn, but I feel like I want people to understand that sometimes it helps just to have somebody else who understands the topic to kind of help you figure out the game plan to move forward. I know these two are like these awesome people that I put up on this higher thing. And I feel like maybe, you know, what I feel like people come to me is kind of that first step, and then I can move them on to somebody in law enforcement, such as Don Jones or Deacon Steve, and he can use his resources. Do you know what I'm saying? It kind of goes, but I know that I have a lot of people that just need to say, is this something I should be worried about? And they don't want to take, in their opinion, the time of somebody. I don't want to say like I have this issue, but really important. Like I know I'm important, but I'm just saying, if you just need to talk to another person that just see, you know, commiserate whether or not this is something that I feel should be just to confirm the suspicions. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That makes
Sure
sense.
does.
That's what parents seem to come to me for, and I want people to know I'm always willing to talk about that. And
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that.
you're welcome.
Well, thank you to all of our guest speakers for sharing your stories, your wisdom, your insight, for encouraging us to learn and listen. This was just really incredible and very informative and helpful and important to the heart, I think. So thank you very much for all of that. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight to also be on this road of learning together as we celebrate our first community ministry connection. If everything goes well with the recording, it will be uploaded to the Family of 4 YouTube channel. We'll hope for the best. And with that, I just want to say thank you very, very much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Laura,
Thank
for
you.
organizing us tonight. Nice to see you, Dawn.
Great to see you too.
Yep. Take care, everybody.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye,
Thank you all.
everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.
Good night. Good night, Rosemary.
Good night.